They called him a liar in front of the whole neighborhood. On Memorial Day, under the bright sun, with flags snapping in the breeze, the HOA president pointed at old Mr. Thompson's chest, at the faded service pins on his jacket, and sneered, "Those aren't real. You're no veteran." The crowd gasped, phones came out, and whispers spread like wildfire. John Thompson, the quiet widower who lived at the end of Oak Street, stood frozen, his hands trembling around a small bundle of flowers meant for the community memorial. He didn't argue, didn't shout. He just stood there, eyes low, as the HOA board members smirked and neighbors murmured. The humiliation stung worse than any wound he'd ever known, and the laughter that followed cut deeper than the wars he'd survived. Nobody in the Pine Hills neighborhood knew much about John. He kept to himself, mowed his lawn at dawn, and hung an American flag that never touched the ground. His house was small, the paint chipped, but his garden bloomed with care. Every Memorial Day, he walked to the neighborhood's tiny war memorial, a stone slab with names etched in it, and placed flowers by hand, touching one name longer than the others. Nobody asked why. Nobody cared. To them, he was just the old man who paid his HOA dues late and got fined for a fence that was an inch too tall. But this year, the HOA decided to make a spectacle. They'd planned a big Memorial Day event, banners, a new speaker system, even a live stream for clout. They wanted Pine Hills to look perfect, and John's quiet ritual didn't fit their image. The HOA president, Karen Mitchell, a sharp-tongued woman with a clipboard always in hand, had been gunning for John for months. His late dues, his non-compliant mailbox, his refusal to join the neighborhood watch, all of it grated on her. When she saw him walk up in his old army jacket, pins glinting faintly, she saw her chance. "Stolen valor," she said loudly, stepping forward. "You think you can parade around in that costume? Show us proof or leave." The crowd shifted, some chuckling, others uneasy. John's face didn't change. He clutched the flowers tighter, his knuckles white, and looked at the memorial. A young board member, Ethan Carter, barely out of college, jumped in. "Yeah, old man, where's your DD 214? Bet you bought that jacket at a thrift store." More laughter rippled. A phone flashed, recording. John stayed silent, his eyes on the stone. He bent to place his flowers, but Karen stepped closer. "You're not welcome here," she said. "This is for real heroes." The words hit like a slap. John straightened, nodded once, and turned to walk away, his limp more noticeable than usual. The crowd parted, some avoiding his gaze, others whispering. The video was already online, titled "Fake Veteran Busted at Pine Hills Memorial." In minutes, it had hundreds of views. John reached his truck, parked at the edge of the lot, and sat inside, hands resting on a folded flag. He didn't start the engine. He just watched the memorial from afar, his chest tight with something heavier than anger. Back at the event, Karen basked in her moment, directing volunteers to adjust flags for the cameras. Ethan posted another clip, grinning. Most neighbors went along, caught up in the HOA's polished show. But one person didn't. Sarah Miller, a single mom who'd moved to Pine Hills a year ago, stood at the back, her son tugging her hand. She didn't know John well, but she'd seen him fix her mailbox once, no questions asked. His silence now didn't feel like guilt. It felt like pain. She pulled out her phone, not to record, but to search. "John Thompson, Army," she typed. What she found made her breath catch, a grainy article from decades ago, mentioning a soldier who survived a classified mission in Vietnam. The name matched. Her heart sank as she looked at the crowd, still cheering for Karen's speech about honoring true veterans. Sarah glanced at John's truck, still parked, still waiting. She typed a message to an old friend, a Marine she'd met years ago. "I need your help," she wrote. "It's about a man named John Thompson. He's being humiliated, and I think he's the real deal." She hit send, hoping it wasn't too late. The Pine Hills Memorial Day event rolled on, the crowd louder now, clapping as Karen stood at the podium, her voice sharp over the new speakers. "We honor real heroes," she said, pausing for cheers. "Not people who fake their service for attention." Her eyes flicked toward John's truck, barely visible in the distance. The jab was clear, and the crowd ate it up, some nodding, others sharing the viral clip on their phones. Ethan, the young board member, stood nearby, scrolling through comments on his post, grinning at the likes piling up. Fake vet busted. One read, "Good call, Pine Hills HOA," another said. The video had hit 1,000 views, and Ethan felt like a hero himself. But the air felt heavier to Sarah, who stood at the crowd's edge, her son playing with a flag. She kept glancing at her phone, waiting for a reply from her Marine friend, Tom. Her search on John had pulled up more, a faded photo of a young soldier, face grim, standing in a jungle with a rifle. The caption mentioned a Vietnam recon team classified, with only 2 survivors. John's name was there, buried in the text. Her stomach twisted. How could nobody know? She looked at John's truck again, its door still closed, and felt a chill. Something wasn't right about this. Back at the podium, Karen handed the mic to a local councilman, who droned on about community pride. Nobody mentioned John, but the whispers kept going, neighbors trading looks. "Always thought he was weird," one said. "Lives alone never talks," another added. The HOA had painted him as a fraud, and the story stuck. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Tom. "John Thompson? I know that name. Checking with someone. Stay put." Her heart raced. She typed back, "Hurry. They're tearing him apart." She didn't know why she cared so much, but John's quiet nod when he fixed her mailbox stuck with her. He hadn't asked for thanks, just did it and left. Now he was alone in that truck, carrying a weight nobody saw. Meanwhile, Ethan took the mic, puffed up with confidence. "We protect this community's honor," he said, voice loud. "We don't let people lie about serving our country." The crowd clapped, but some hesitated, their smiles fading. An older woman near Sarah muttered, "This doesn't feel right." Sarah nodded but stayed quiet, her eyes on the truck. John sat inside, his hands still on the folded flag, staring at the memorial. The stone slab listed names, one standing out, Michael Reed. John's fingers traced the flag's edge, his lips moving slightly, like he was whispering to someone. He didn't hear the crowd's cheers or see the phones pointed his way. His mind was somewhere else, muddy trails, gunfire, a promise made long ago. The event hit a peak as Karen announced a moment of silence for true veterans. The crowd bowed their heads, but the silence felt hollow to Sarah. She stepped closer to the truck, her son trailing behind. "Mom, why is Mr. Thompson alone?" he asked. She didn't answer, her throat tight. Then a low rumble broke the quiet. A black SUV pulled into the lot, tires crunching gravel. The crowd didn't notice, too busy with their ceremony. Sarah turned, her pulse quickening. The SUV's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, in a crisp Marine dress uniform. Medals gleamed on his chest, for stars on his shoulders. General David Walsh, retired, his face hard as stone. Sarah froze. Tom's text had reached him. The general's eyes scanned the crowd, then locked on John's truck. He didn't hesitate, striding toward it with a purpose that made the air shift. Karen, still at the podium, faltered mid-sentence. Ethan lowered his phone, confused. A few heads turned, whispers starting. "Who's that?" someone asked. The general didn't stop. He reached the truck, tapped the window, and waited. John looked up, his eyes meeting the general's. For a moment, neither moved. Then John opened the door, stepped out, and stood, his limp barely noticeable now. The general saluted, sharp and slow. John returned it, his hand steady despite his age. The crowd went quiet, the moment heavy with something nobody understood yet. The crowd's silence stretched, heavy and uneasy, as General Walsh stood beside John, his salute lingering like a warning. Karen, still clutching the podium, tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "General, we didn't mean," she started, but Walsh raised a hand, cutting her off. His eyes burned, not with anger, but something colder, sharper. "You don't know what you've done," he said, his voice low, carrying across the square. The crowd leaned in, phone still out, but now recording him. Ethan, pale, stepped back, his confidence gone. Sarah watched, her son gripping her hand, as the general turned to John. "Sergeant Thompson," he said, loud enough for all to hear, "this isn't how you should be treated." John didn't speak, just nodded, his eyes on the memorial stone. The name Michael Reed seemed to glow under the sun. Sarah's phone buzzed again, a text from Tom. Walsh knew Thompson in Vietnam. He's not just any vet. Her heart pounded. She hadn't expected this. Nobody had. The general faced the crowd, his medals glinting. This man, he said, pointing to John, walked through hell in Vietnam. Classified recon, missions you'll never read about. He carried men out of jungles, saved lives, and lost brothers. And you call him a fraud. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A neighbor dropped her phone, stunned. Karen's face flushed, her clipboard shaking. Ethan muttered, "I didn't know," but nobody heard him. The general's voice grew darker. You fined him for his fence, his mailbox, his late dues. You made his life harder. And today, you shamed him in front of this memorial. He paused, letting the words sink in. You don't deserve to stand here. The crowd shifted, some looking away, others whispering. Sarah felt her son tug her sleeve. "Mom, is Mr. Thompson a hero?" he asked. She nodded, tears in her eyes. But then came the first twist. A woman pushed through the crowd, older, her face lined with worry. It was Linda Hayes, a retired nurse who lived across from John. "Wait," she called, her voice trembling. "There's something you need to know." All eyes turned to her. Karen snapped, "This isn't the time, Linda." But Walsh raised a hand again, silencing her. "Speak," he said. Linda took a breath. "John's been getting letters. Anonymous ones, threatening him. They started after he missed an HOA payment last year. I saw one in his mailbox. It said, 'Leave or we'll make you.' I thought it was a prank, but now," she trailed off, looking at Karen. The crowd murmured, heads turning to the HOA president. Karen's eyes widened. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her voice shook. Ethan stepped forward, nervous. "I didn't write anything," he said, too fast. The general's gaze locked on him, and Ethan froze. Sarah's mind raced. Threats? This wasn't just about a video or a fake accusation anymore. Something darker was happening in Pine Hills. John finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I didn't want trouble," he said, looking at the crowd. "I just wanted to honor my friend." He touched the flag in his hands, his fingers tracing the folds. "Michael Reed died, saving me. I promised I'd never let his name fade." The crowd went still, the weight of his words sinking in. Sarah's son whispered, "He's brave, Mom." She squeezed his hand, her eyes on John. Then came another twist. A man in a suit, unnoticed until now, stepped forward from the crowd's edge. He was Richard Parker, a lawyer who'd moved to Pine Hills last month. "I've seen those letters," he said, his voice steady. "I found one in my own mailbox, warning me not to help John with his HOA fines. It had the HOA's logo." The crowd gasped again, louder now. Karen's face went white. "That's a lie," she shouted, but her voice cracked. Ethan backed away, his phone slipping from his hand. The general turned to Richard. "You have proof?" he asked. Richard nodded. "I kept the letter. And I've got emails from the HOA board, pressuring neighbors to report John for violations." The crowd erupted in whispers, some angry, others shocked. Sarah looked at John, who stood unmoving, his eyes still on the memorial. The general's voice cut through the noise. "This ends now," he said, his tone like steel. He stepped toward Karen, who flinched. "You've got a lot to answer for," he said. The crowd held its breath, waiting for what came next. The crowd's whispers grew into a low roar as General Walsh stared down Karen, his words still echoing. "You've got a lot to answer for." Karen's hands shook, her clipboard slipping to the ground. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. Ethan, now at the crowd's edge, looked like he wanted to run. The air in Pine Hills Square felt thick, like a storm was about to break. Sarah clutched her son's hand, her eyes darting between John, still standing by his truck, and the general, whose presence seemed to hold the entire event hostage. Richard, the lawyer, held up a crumpled letter with the HOA's logo, his voice steady. "This was in my mailbox 2 weeks ago," he said. "It told me to stop asking questions about John's fines, or I'd regret it." The crowd gasped, some stepping closer to see. A woman shouted, "Karen, what's going on?" Another neighbor, a quiet man named Tom Baker, spoke up. "I got one too," he said. It said to report John for his flagpole being too high, or my dues would double. The crowd turned on Karen, their faces a mix of shock and anger. She stammered, "I didn't send those. Someone's framing me." But her voice sounded weak, desperate. General Walsh didn't blink. "Framing," he said, his tone sharp. "You've been targeting this man for months." "Why?" John, still silent, looked at the memorial, his fingers tight around the folded flag. Sarah noticed his jaw clench, like he was holding back a flood. Then came the first twist. A young woman, Emily, who worked at the HOA office, pushed forward, her face pale. "I saw something," she said, voice shaking. "Last month, I found files in Karen's office, records of fake violations for John's house. They were backdated, made to look like he'd been breaking rules for years." The crowd erupted, voices overlapping. "Fake violations? What else are they hiding?" Karen's eyes widened. "That's not true," she yelled. But Emily kept going. "There was a note too, in your handwriting, Karen. It said, 'Get Thompson out before he talks.'" The square went quiet, the weight of Emily's words sinking in. Sarah's son whispered, "Mom, what's happening?" She shushed him, her heart racing. What did John know that scared the HOA so much? General Walsh turned to Emily. "You have that note?" he asked. She nodded, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "I kept it just in case," she said. The general took it, glanced at the writing, and held it up. "This is evidence," he said. "This isn't just about a jacket or medals. This is a campaign." Karen backed away, her face ashen. Ethan, now sweating, muttered, "I didn't know about any files." But nobody believed him. Then came another twist. A man in a worn jacket, unnoticed until now, stepped from the crowd. He was Mike Larson, a mechanic who'd lived in Pine Hills for decades. "I know why they're after John," he said, his voice rough. "It's about the land." Heads turned. "What land?" Sarah asked, loud enough for others to hear. Mike pointed to the memorial. "This square used to be part of John's property. He donated it to the community years ago for the memorial, but the HOA's been trying to sell it to developers. John's been fighting it quietly, saying it's sacred ground." The crowd gasped again, louder now. Sarah looked at John, who hadn't moved, his eyes still on the stone. The name Michael Reed seemed to carry a new weight. "He's been getting threats ever since he refused to sign off on the sale," Mike added. "I overheard Karen talking to a developer last year, saying they'd force John out one way or another." Karen shook her head, frantic. "That's a lie. I never." But the general cut her off. "Enough," he said, his voice like a blade. He turned to John. "Is this true, Sergeant?" John finally looked up, his eyes tired but clear. "I made a promise," he said softly. "This land is for Michael and the others, not for profit." The crowd went silent, some wiping tears. Sarah felt a chill, not just from the words, but from the way John said them, like he'd been carrying this fight alone for years. The general's face hardened. "You targeted a hero to steal his legacy," he said to Karen. "This stops today." The crowd cheered, but it wasn't joy. It was anger mixed with shame. Something dark was unraveling in Pine Hills, and nobody knew how deep it went. The crowd's cheers turned into a tense hum, their anger at the HOA boiling under the hot Memorial Day sun. General Walsh stood tall, his eyes locked on Karen, who shrank under the weight of his words. Her clipboard lay forgotten on the ground, her face pale as neighbors glared. Ethan, now at the back, fumbled with his phone, trying to delete the viral video. But it was too late. Thousands had seen it. Sarah held her son close, his small voice asking, "Why is everyone mad, Mom?" She didn't answer, her gaze fixed on John, who stood by the memorial, clutching his folded flag. His silence felt louder than the crowd's noise, like a storm waiting to break. The general's voice cut through again. "You tried to erase a man's honor for land," he said to Karen. "You'll answer for it." Karen shook her head, desperate. "I didn't do this alone," she blurted, her voice cracking. The crowd froze, sensing a shift. "What's that mean?" Walsh demanded. Karen's eyes darted to Ethan, then away. "The board," we all agreed. "It wasn't just me." A gasp rippled through the square. Then came the first twist. A man stepped forward, gray-haired, in a faded flannel shirt. It was Frank Wilson, a retired cop who rarely spoke at HOA meetings. "She's lying," he said, his voice steady. "I was on the board last year. Karen pushed us to target John, said his land was holding back progress. When I refused, they forced me out." The crowd erupted, voices overlapping. "You kicked out Frank. What else did they do?" Sarah's heart sank deeper. The HOA's corruption ran further than she'd thought. Karen stammered, "That's not true," but Frank held up a crumpled paper. "This is my resignation letter," he said. "Karen threatened to fine my family if I didn't sign it." The crowd's anger surged, some shouting at Karen, others at Ethan, who looked ready to bolt. General Walsh took the letter, his face grim. "This is a pattern," he said. "How many others did you silence?" Karen didn't answer, her eyes wide with panic. Then came another twist. A teenage girl, Mia, pushed through, tears streaming down her face. "I know something too," she said, voice shaking. "My dad worked for the developer Karen met. He overheard her last month, saying they'd scared John into selling by making his life hell. Fines, threats, even cutting his power." The crowd gasped, louder now. Sarah remembered the week John's lights went out, how he'd sat on his porch with a lantern, never complaining. "They cut his power," a neighbor yelled. Mia nodded. "Dad quit when he heard. He told me to stay quiet, but I can't anymore." She looked at John, who met her eyes briefly, his face unreadable. The general turned to John. "Did you know about this?" he asked. John nodded slowly. "I suspected," he said, his voice low. "The letters, the fines, the power cuts. They wanted me gone. But this land," he pointed to the memorial, "belongs to Michael and the others. I won't let it go." His words hit the crowd like a punch, some wiping tears, others clenching fists. Sarah's son tugged her hand. "He's protecting his friend," he whispered, his eyes wide. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. The horror wasn't just the HOA's lies. It was how far they'd gone to break one man. Then came a third twist. A woman in a suit, unnoticed until now, stepped forward. She was Lisa Carter, Ethan's older sister and a local journalist. "I've been investigating the HOA," she said, holding up a flash drive. "I found emails between Karen and the developer, planning to rezone this square for condos. They bribed board members to push John out." The crowd roared, some shouting, "Arrest her." Karen's knees buckled. "I didn't bribe anyone," she cried, but Lisa shook her head. "The emails are real. I've got proof of payments." Ethan, now trembling, whispered, "I didn't know about bribes." But Lisa shot him a look. "You helped spread their lies, Ethan," she said. The crowd's anger turned on him, and he shrank back. General Walsh raised a hand, silencing the square. "This isn't just about one man anymore," he said. "This is about a community betrayed." He looked at John, who stood still, the flag in his hands like a shield. "Sergeant Thompson, you've carried enough. It's time they paid." The crowd cheered, but it was raw, almost vengeful, like something dark had been unleashed in Pine Hills. The crowd's roar faded into a tense hush, their eyes darting between General Walsh, John, and Karen, who stood frozen at the podium. The air in Pine Hills square crackled, like the moment before lightning. John clutched his folded flag, his gaze fixed on the memorial stone, the name Michael Reed etched deep. Sarah's son whispered, "Mom, is Mr. Thompson okay?" She squeezed his hand, unable to answer, her heart pounding as the general stepped forward. "You've heard enough," Walsh said, his voice steady but sharp. "Now, Karen, tell the truth. Why did you target this man?" Karen's lips trembled. "I told you it wasn't just me," she snapped. "The board voted to clean up the neighborhood. John's house, his fines, he was a problem." A neighbor shouted, "A problem? He's a veteran." Karen flinched. "We didn't know," she cried. "He never proved it." General Walsh's eyes narrowed. "You didn't ask," he said. "You saw a quiet man and thought you could break him." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others glaring. Then came the first twist. Lisa, the journalist, held up her flash drive. "I've got more," she said. "Emails show Karen and the developer planned to frame John for code violations to force him out. They even hired someone to fake those threatening letters." The crowd gasped. Sarah's jaw dropped. "Hired someone," she said aloud. Lisa nodded. A contractor named Greg Holt. He's got a record. Intimidation, harassment. Karen paid him to scare John. Karen shook her head, frantic. That's a lie, Lisa. I'd never. But Ethan cut in, his voice shaking. It's true, he said, stepping forward. The crowd turned, stunned. I overheard you talking to Greg last month, Karen. You told him to make the letters sound real. Karen's face went white. Ethan, shut up, she hissed. He shook his head, tears in his eyes. I'm done lying for you. I thought we were just enforcing rules, but you went too far. The crowd erupted, shouting at Karen. You paid someone to threaten him? How could you? General Walsh raised a hand, silencing them. Where's this Greg Holt now? He asked Ethan. Ethan swallowed hard. He's here, he said, pointing to a man at the crowd's edge, wearing a dark hoodie. All eyes turned. Greg, caught, froze, then bolted toward the parking lot. The crowd surged, some yelling, "Stop him." Sarah's son clung to her, scared. Mom, who's that guy? He asked. Someone bad, she whispered, her eyes on John, who hadn't moved. Then came another twist. Frank, the retired cop, stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. I know Greg, he said. He's been hanging around Pine Hills, watching John's house. I saw him last week, messing with John's power box. The crowd gasped again. Sarah remembered John's dark house, the lantern on his porch. You saw that? She asked Frank. He nodded. I reported it to the HOA, but Karen ignored me. Now I know why. Karen's voice broke. I didn't tell him to do that, she shouted. Greg acted on his own. But General Walsh wasn't buying it. You hired a thug to terrorize a hero, he said. You don't get to dodge this. He turned to John. Sergeant, anything you want to say? John looked up, his voice soft but steady. I just wanted peace, he said. This land is for Michael, for the men who didn't come back. I promised to protect it. His words hit hard, some neighbors wiping tears. Sarah's son whispered, he's like a soldier still. She nodded, her chest tight. Then came a third twist. A woman's voice rang out from the back. I have proof too. It was Anna, a quiet librarian who'd lived in Pine Hills for years. She held up her phone. I recorded Karen meeting Greg behind the community center. She told him to make John's life hell until he sold the land. The crowd roared angrier now. Anna played the audio, Karen's voice clear. Do whatever it takes, Greg. Just get him out. Karen collapsed to her knees, sobbing. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she cried. General Walsh's face was stone. You meant to destroy a man, he said. And you almost did. He looked at John, who stood silent, the flag in his hands a symbol of everything he'd fought for. The crowd's anger turned to shame, their eyes on John, waiting for what came next. The photo of my cabin, flames scrawled over it, was a devil's taunt, but my Marine heart stood firm, anchored by faith. Sarah was safe with Mrs. Ellis, and Lakeview Pines burned with righteous anger after Anna's broadcast exposed Diane's fraud ring. I stood by my lake, praying for strength, my sniper's calm, a gift from God. Diane was out there, her venom ready to strike, but I'd faced ambushes before. The Lord had guided my aim, and I trusted his plan. At dawn, the first twist hit. Deputy Cole called. Tom, we found Diane's hideout, an old cabin by the lake, he said. She left a burner phone with texts planning your cabin's fire. My pulse quickened. Diane was closer than I thought. But Cole added, she's gone again, and we found gas cans. Fear gripped me, but I prayed, my sniper focus sharp. I checked my hidden cameras, spotting a new figure near my dock, Diane, in a cap, carrying a bag. I sent the footage to Cole, my heart steady. The second twist came at noon. Anna Lee arrived, her face tense. Tom, we got a tip. Diane's been laundering HOA money through a fake charity, she said. It's linked to her fraud ring, $2 million stolen from communities. I gasped. Diane's sins were deeper than I'd imagined. Anna showed bank records, Diane's name tied to the charity's account. Your story's national now, she said. People are calling you a hero. I shook my head, humble. I'm just fighting for what's right. Sarah ran up, holding a drawing of our flag. For you, Uncle Tom, she said. I hugged her, feeling God's light in her smile. The third twist struck that afternoon. Mr. Carter burst in, holding a scorched HOA ledger. "Tom, this was in my yard," he said. "Diane tried to burn it." The ledger showed $15,000 more in stolen dues, hidden by Diane's fake projects. My blood boiled. She tried to destroy evidence, but God preserved it. I called Luke, who said, "This voids her forged lease. We're suing her for fraud." I nodded, my sniper's eye on the endgame. The fourth twist hit at dusk. Mrs. Ellis called, her voice shaking. "Tom, Diane's brother Greg turned himself in," she said. "He's testifying against her." Greg had confessed to the HOA office break-in and shed fire, saying Diane threatened his family. My heart softened. Greg was lost, but seeking redemption. I prayed for him, feeling the Lord's mercy. Sarah overheard, asking, "Is Greg sorry?" I nodded. Sometimes people find their way back. The fifth twist came that night. Cole arrived, his face grim. "Tom, we found Diane's car near your cabin," he said. "She left a note. Sniper, you can't stop me." My stomach dropped. I checked my cameras. Diane had planted a gas can by my porch, caught clear as day. Cole took it as evidence, saying, "We're closing in." Neighbors gathered, their faces fierce. Mr. Carter said, "Tom, we're praying for you." I felt their faith, a wall against Diane's evil. Anna's next broadcast aired, showing the ledger and Greg's confession. The screen read, "Marine sniper defends home, my cabin proud against the lake." Neighbors cheered, some crying, their voices a chorus of justice. Sarah held my hand, whispering, "God's with us, right?" I nodded, my soul strong. But the sixth twist landed as we watched. My phone buzzed, a video from Diane, her face twisted. "Your cabin's next, sniper," she hissed, holding a lighter by my dock. My heart stopped. She was steps away. I called Cole, who said, "We're patrolling your land now." I grabbed my old marine flashlight, scanning the lake. A shadow moved, Diane creeping toward my cabin. I prayed, my sniper instinct alive, ready to protect my home. The community stood with me, their faith afire. Diane thought she'd burn us down, but the Lord had other plans, and this Marine was ready for her final strike. The Pine Hills square pulsed with tension, the crowd's eyes burning into Karen and Diane as General Walsh held the tiny camera, its wires glinting like evidence of betrayal. Karen, still on her knees, sobbed, "I didn't know it would go this far." Diane, pale, snapped, "Stop lying, Karen. You pushed for this." The crowd gasped, their anger now split between the two. Sarah held her son tight, his small voice trembling. "Mom, are they going to jail?" She didn't know how to answer, her heart racing as John stood by the memorial, his flag a quiet anchor. General Walsh's voice boomed, "This ends now." He turned to the crowd. "You let this happen. You laughed, you filmed, you looked away. But this man," he pointed to John, "never wavered." The crowd fell silent, shame settling in. Then came the first twist. A police siren wailed, cutting through the quiet. 2 squad cars pulled into the lot, lights flashing. An officer, Captain Ryan, stepped out, his face grim. "We got a call about threats and sabotage," he said, eyeing Karen and Diane. "We've also got a warrant for Greg Holt." The crowd parted as officers moved toward Greg, who'd been caught trying to slip away. He struggled, shouting, "I just followed orders," but they cuffed him. Karen's sobs grew louder. "I didn't tell him to hurt anyone," she cried. Ryan shook his head. "We've got your emails, ma'am. You're coming too." The crowd cheered, but it was raw, almost vengeful. Sarah's son whispered, "They're in trouble now, right?" She nodded, her eyes on John, who hadn't moved. Then came another twist. Lisa, the journalist, stepped forward, her flash drive raised. "I sent my evidence to the state attorney last night," she said. "The HOA's been laundering developer money through fake fines for years, not just John's. Half the board's implicated." The crowd roared, stunned. Neighbors turned to each other, whispering, "They stole from us?" All this time. Diane tried to run, but an officer grabbed her. "You can't prove that," she yelled. Lisa smirked. "The bank records do." General Walsh nodded at Lisa. "Good work," he said, then turned to John. "Sergeant, this land is yours. What do you want done?" John looked at the memorial, his voice soft. Keep it for them, he said, touching Michael Reed's name. No condos, no deals. Just their names. The crowd went quiet, some crying. Sarah felt tears fall, her son's hand warm in hers. Then came the final twist. A man in a suit, unnoticed until now, stepped forward. It was James, a city councilman. I've been watching this HOA for months, he said. John came to me last year, warned me about the land deal. I didn't act fast enough. But today, I'm proposing this square be renamed the Michael Reed Memorial, with John's blessing. The crowd erupted in applause, not loud, but deep reverent. John nodded once, his eyes distant. Michael would have liked that, he said. General Walsh saluted him again, slower this time. You carried their names alone, he said. Now we all will. The crowd joined in, some saluting, others placing hands over hearts. Karen and Diane were led away, heads low, as Greg shouted from a squad car. Ethan, tears streaming, approached John. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. I didn't know. John looked at him, then handed him the folded flag. Hold this until you understand, he said. Ethan nodded, clutching it tight. The ceremony ended quietly, no music, no speeches. Neighbors stayed, placing flowers by the memorial, some whispering apologies to John. He didn't stay long, walking back to his truck, his limp steady. Sarah and her son followed. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, the boy said. John smiled faintly. Just keep the names alive, he said. Days later, the square was renamed. Volunteers fixed John's fence, mowed his lawn, brought meals. The HOA board dissolved, replaced by new faces, including Frank and Lisa. The moral was clear. Honor isn't loud, but it endures. John sat on his porch, coffee in hand, flag flying high. He didn't need the crowd's cheers. He'd kept his promise to Michael, and that was enough. Pine Hills never forgot. Silence could hide heroes, but truth would always find them.